Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannic, and today our guest is Forrest Tierce with Dharma Voices for Animals. And we're going to talk about the connection of Buddhism and veganism. But before we get into the conversation with Forrest, just briefly, a friend sent me an article in Psychology Today, and it was about research done on people's attitudes towards animal issues and animal policy. And they found something interesting, and I think it's something that is interesting for us to know. They called it pluralistic ignorance. And it's this phenomenon where people mistakenly believe that others have different opinions or different feelings from them on certain issues. And people will underestimate other people's support of something or feeling the same way as you do. So they feel like they're the only ones feeling this way, right? And so they found this is very strong around animals and animal issues. So people really do support animals and animal issues and not wanting to see harm come to them, but they don't think others care about it as much as they do, right? But there's a very high percentage apparently of people that do care about animals according to this study and according to lots of studies. I mean, we see this all the time. And this is where I think it's really important to talk about these things, to speak up. Others do care. And apparently, according to this study, it happens with climate change as well, this pluralistic ignorance where people think that others don't care as much as they do or don't want to engage around it. But actually, a very high percentage of people are concerned and do care. And with the animal one, they asked about everything from animals in research, animals in zoos, animal agriculture, and there were well over half and sometimes 70 and 80% in some instances that were in support of ending these industries. So much of what is holding people back from being vegan, I think, is psychological. All the barriers and excuses that we put up, but this is really interesting too. I think that people are just shy about these things because, according to the study, they don't think that large numbers of people agree with them. And they don't want to be seen as rocking the boat or as the agitator. So let that be our job. Speak up, agitate in compassionate ways, of course, but find ways to let others know that they're not alone, that they are not the only ones who care about animals, who care about the planet. Actions that we take to help animals, like living vegan, they just reflect the values that most people already have towards animals and animal protection. As this study found, most people care about animals and don't want to see them suffer, but they don't realize or they don't think about how animal suffering is connected to their food. We have become masters of cognitive dissonance and of disconnecting the meat and dairy and eggs we consume to the animals that were confined and killed for those products. But most people, they do love animals. They don't want to see them hurt. So when we educate on that connection, we're just opening their hearts to the ethical views they already hold. We're not forcing anyone. Find the people that want to hear about it. And according to this article, there are a lot. And help them to break free of that cognitive dissonance. Help them to live a purposeful life where their actions, their purchases, their choices reflect the kind of person they want to be, a person that doesn't harm animals. So let's transition into our interview today and hear about the connection of veganism and Buddhism. I hope you enjoy it. So today we are welcoming Forrest Tierce to the podcast. Forrest has been a dedicated vegan for 17 years. He draws from 2 decades of Buddhist practice across multiple traditions with a deep commitment to the heart of the Buddhist teachings, especially the Five Precepts, which we'll probably get into, as guiding principles for compassionate and ethical living. His professional background includes personal training, sales, and most recently serving as an interpretive park ranger for the National Park Service, which I'm also interested in. We'll probably talk about that too. Forrest currently serves as the U.S. Projects Director for Dharma Voices for Animals, where he works to raise awareness for the connectedness between the ecological crisis caused by animal agriculture and Buddhist ethics. Welcome to the podcast, Forrest.
Thank you so much, Hope. I'm really grateful to be here, and it's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you. Of course, I love when we get to talk spiritual. This is near and dear to my heart, as I think my podcast listeners will know, but I rarely really cover Buddhism. Buddhism is, of the three Dharma traditions, the one that I'm not as familiar with. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. But before we get into that, we like to get to know you with an opening question of why and when did you go vegan?
Awesome. Yeah. So gratitude for giving me a voice here, and also Dharma Voices for Animals, a nonprofit that works globally to help reduce animal suffering. Yeah. So my journey to veganism is kind of interesting. I'm actually in Texas right now visiting family. I grew up in Texas. My dad worked in animal agriculture in the poultry industry.
Wow.
And I grew up eating barbecue. My granddad was famous for his barbecue. I grew up in a hunting culture. I was a hunter, and I was a very much a meat eating, make fun of vegetarian hunter at one point in
Wow.
my life, which is crazy for me to think about. Like, I was not raised in a land of Dharma. I was raised in the Bible Belt where torturing and I hate to say it, but like people enjoy the cruelty of being cruel to animals. Like, it's hunting season is happening right now in Texas, and people are hunting deer and it's hunting turkeys and pigs and boars. And that's just part of the culture here, is just really geared towards a very strong kind of speciesist mentality.
Wow.
But I moved to California, was living in Los Angeles and going through my kind of like a emotional bottom, and I found a spiritual practice, and Buddhism kind of was introduced to me. But I kind of got triangulated at one point by three people at the same time. I was going to a spiritual center called Agape, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith. He's like a non-denominate, or I think he calls it a trans-denominational spiritual center based on universal love, is what Agape stands for. He
Mm.
pulls from Buddha and Jesus and Hinduism and Gandhi and Dr. King, and he just melds this beautiful message. And he was talking about veganism. And then I had a friend at the time who was a tough guy from London who was tatted from the neck down. He was a hardcore vegan, and he called me a phony because I told him I was an environmentalist. This is in 2007. He said, "No, you're a phony. You eat meat. You're not an environmentalist."
Wow.
And then I was eating a burger after these two kind of events, and I was looking at my little doggy, and I just kind of had a lightning bolt hit me, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I love this dog. He is my baby, my fur baby, and I'm eating an animal. What's the difference between the animal I'm eating and this dog right here?" A couple days later, I was on my way to meditation, and I ate a can of tuna, which is just disgusting to me to think about now, but it's kind of a thing I would do back then. And I went to meditation with Reverend Michael, and I was sitting in a group of maybe a couple hundred people meditating. And I also grew up fishing, and I caught a lot of fish and killed a lot of fish. I all of a sudden had the sensation of a fish being on a fishing line fighting to get free happening in my stomach. I was having spasms in my stomach from eating the can of tuna. And it was literally like, if you've ever gone fishing and you know what it feels like when you catch a fish and it's fighting and you're tugging and you're, you know, pulling the fish out of the water. That's literally what was happening in my stomach as I was sitting in meditation. And tears were rolling down my eyes. And I came home and I told my wife, "I'm going to be vegan." And she looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" Even though I'd been challenged by my friend and had thought about it a little bit. I had eaten a steak, I think 3 days before this at a friend's house. And I just can't, I'm
Wow.
vegan. It was boom, night and day. I stopped immediately and started reading all the ingredients. And I was in the middle of my bike racing season. I was a competitive cross country mountain bike racer at the time, and racing like Cat 1, cross country, up and down the mountains and, super fit. And I was afraid I was going to, lose all my strength and not be able to finish and complete my racing season because I was going to be vegan. I literally believed that.
Wow.
As I was becoming vegan, I'm like, I'm going to lose all my strength and be so weak, but I'm doing this anyway. And within a month, I lived out in LA at the time, and we had the Santa Monica Mountains. I had all of these hills that I did time trials up for years. Within 1 month, I had beaten all of my best times up these hills. Like time trials I had been repeating for years. I was beating them by a minute or two within a month of going vegan. And I was like, oh my God, my body is so efficient. My blood is thinner. My lungs are clear. I'm like, I was shocked. So, I had the complete opposite thing happen than what I had expected. And so, yeah, it's been actually 18 years. I got to update my bio. We just had our vegan anniversary in September,
Oh,
middle of
okay.
September. My wife thought I was crazy. She kind of washed me for a week to make sure I didn't drop dead. And then she's like, I'm being vegan too. So we've been on this journey together the whole time.
Oh, wow.
So,
Congratulations on 18 years of vegan. That's awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, well, I went vegan in 1990, and there was a similar thing that everyone said I was going to be unhealthy. Everybody said I was going to be protein deficient, and but I didn't care. Like I was doing
Yeah.
it because I didn't want to hurt my friends, the animals.
Yes.
And I thought, well, even if I am less healthy, I'm still going to do it.
Yep.
But luckily and beautifully, it improved my health and I felt so much better. And it definitely shows that it's also connected and it is the right path, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you went straight from steak to vegan in like 3 days. That's amazing. And what's also amazing is that it was during meditation that you kind of were feeling what a fish feels or what a fish would feel by being, caught on a hook, and that you were kind of experiencing that and connecting to the fish. So that kind of shows how contemplative practices and meditation can really, connect you to the animals and what's happening in the world. That's really beautiful. So kind of getting into that, I do want you to talk about Dharma Voices for Animals and your role as the US project's director. Tell us about what Dharma Voices for Animals does, and maybe how you got into Buddhism and how you got into this work.
So Dharma Voices for Animals is an international Buddhist organization that promotes animal advocacy. So we feel very clearly when you read the Buddhist teachings, it's very clear, not ambiguous, very, very literal. The Buddha taught the five precepts for the lay practitioners when he walked the earth. If you wanted to become a monk, there was 14 or more precepts. But if you wanted to just be a lay practitioner, the Buddha encouraged that. And he said anyone can become a practitioner. They just need to follow the five precepts. And the first precept is do not kill. All beings love life. All beings fear death. Therefore, one should not slay nor cause to slay. So we have that on the DVA website. It's not ambiguous. It's very clear. We were all raised to believe that animals are food. And even if you enter into a powerful spiritual group of Buddhists, many people were raised in it, and there's teachers that justify it and people that rationalize it, and it's carnism and it's powerful. It's an addiction of the mind. So, unfortunately, many Buddhists are supporting animal torture by eating animals and supporting animal agriculture. So, DVA is based in the United States, but we have a large international organization as well in Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Thailand. These are countries that have a high Buddhist population anyway. Many of the diets there lean towards plants anyway, so we've had really amazing success overseas. The United States, I am the U.S. project director in the United States. I'm launching an initiative. In the United States, we've had met with a little more stubborn mentality. I think the Buddhism in the West is very much kind of intertwined with carnist ideology that we've all been raised with here in the West. There's also quite a bit of psychotherapy that has been intertwined with Buddhism in the United States. To focus on what DVA is doing and what I'm doing with DVA is we're basically trying to create community around Buddhist centers that are utilizing the Buddhist teachings on compassion for all beings and eco-dharma by serving plant-based food. So I'm launching a project. It's called the Sustainable Sangha Collective, and rooted in the current environmental crisis, grounded in the Buddhist teaching on compassion for all beings. The motto of the Sustainable Sangha Collective is one bowl, one earth. And in Buddhism, the bowl represents the alms bowl, where a Buddhist monk may take what is offered. It's a sign of humility and interconnectedness. So the bowl represents interconnectedness, and the earth, we're all on one earth. The earth is in dire need of serious help right now. We're crossing tipping points on all these different thresholds. So we're just trying to raise awareness around the environmental impact of animal agriculture
Yeah.
and the Buddhist teachings, the ethics around Buddhist teachings around compassion.
Hmm.
And the
And
Sustainable Sangha Collective is basically just recognizing Buddhist centers who are already offering plant-based foods. So the goal is to get 100 or more sanghas, Buddhist centers, in the collective, have a big meeting where we can all come together and have this plant-based food be normal in Buddhist centers and not be something that's a fringe conversation. It's a normalized thing. So that's the ultimate mission and the ultimate goal of my job at DVA is to create conversation around plant-based food at Buddhist centers. So
nice. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to pop in a little bit and define Sangha.
yes,
But you did, I think, eventually that Sangha is like a Hindu temple or a church. It's where Buddhists gather and worship. So, um,
correct.
yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to focus on like retreat centers also, where like if they're, many of these places have month-long or 6-month-long or whatever retreats where people are living there and eating 3 times a day.
yeah,
And many of them, most of them offer vegetarian options. Many of them offer animal flesh as well, on
yeah.
top of dairy and eggs. But a lot of them are offering plant-based and allowing people to bring whatever they would like to bring. We're trying to shift it more to where it's just a normal conversation and a normal expectation. It's funny, once I started working for Dharma Voices for Animals, my non-Buddhist family and my non-Buddhist friends said, "Why? I thought Buddhists were all vegan already."
Yeah.
I have
Uh,
some my in-laws are some of them are like, wait a minute, aren't Buddhists all vegan already? And like, no, they are not.
no.
That's kind of
Yeah.
the perception people might have, but that's not the case. So
Right, right, right. And this kind of rolls into a question that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to ask you about. And that's that some Buddhist communities are vegan and others eat meat and animal products, just like we're talking about. And it's so hard for me, and I'm sure it is for you, to square the Buddhist dictate of compassion for all beings and the actions of some Buddhists when it comes to food. And I remember there was a Buddhist center in Sebastopol, California, where I used to live, and we would drive by and they would have this often, maybe monthly, I don't know, chicken barbecue fundraiser.
hmm
And it was just this moment of like, what? It's so, it just seems so counterintuitive to what the Buddha taught, to Buddhism teachings. And of course, different regions, different Buddhisms have different cultures and different teachings. I mean, there are different Buddhisms. I mean, I think people don't realize that there are different histories and different schools. There's Theravada Buddhism, that's more Burma and Thailand. And I think where Dharma Voices for Animals has kind of your foot in the door in Thailand, but they have a history of being kind of non-veg and not very friendly to veg. But then Mahayana Buddhism, I mean, it all originated in India, but Mahayana is now maybe China, Japan, Korea. They do have a history, a rich history of thousands of years of vegetarian, maybe not thousands, but yeah, going back a long time of
definitely, yeah.
yeah, a vegetarian. And primarily, most Asian countries rarely consume dairy and eggs. So if you're not eating meat, then it is somewhat vegan. But I guess when I guess my question is when it comes to the diaspora and people coming to the West, the cultures kind of get more, whatever the culture is there. So there's Buddhist sanghas and places like retreats that are just kind of adopting more of a Western-ish diet. What have you found in these Buddhist communities around the issue of veganism? And are you finding that practitioners are kind of maybe more open to it now that we are exploring it more, talking about it more? What have you found?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Everything you're saying is 100% right on. My own personal journey through Buddhism explains a lot to where I ended up now. So, my experience, I first started in Buddhism. A friend gave me a book from the Dalai Lama. I think a lot of people think of the Dalai Lama when they think of Buddhism. And anything I'm interested in, I really dive into. So, I dove into Tibetan Buddhism. And, in Tibet, they live on the Tibetan plateau. They're not growing bananas or beans or much produce up there. So
Yeah.
they survived on yak's milk and yak's blood and yak meat
Yeah.
because that's what they had to do on the Tibetan plateau at 14,000 feet. So
Yeah.
people in Los Angeles are saying, hey, we can eat meat because the Dalai Lama and Tibetans eat meat. And I'm saying, well, you shop at Whole Foods. It's
Yeah.
2025.
Right. A
You're
little
not on the
different.
Tibetan plateau, so
Yeah.
so I left the Tibetan tradition after getting into an argument with someone about whether or not we should be having chicken at the meditation meeting, and
Mm.
he was a senior member, and it was belittling, and it was just really a bad experience. So I left there and went to Spirit Rock, which was this was all when I lived in Mill Valley. I went to Spirit Rock and got into a heated debate with the chef in the kitchen about why they were serving animals, and once again felt flustered and frustrated, and then went to Green Gulch in kind of near Muir Beach, also in Marin County, Mill Valley area, and they had their Sunday meeting where it was mostly plant-based, but they still had dairy and eggs, and ended up into another discussion with someone around dairy and eggs, and just kind of got flustered and said, I've been to three different traditions. You kind of a Theravadan Vipassana type tradition at Spirit Rock, and Tibetan tradition, and now a Mahayana tradition, and animals are being served everywhere.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, what did the Buddha say? What did, okay, everyone's interpreting these things different ways. What did the Buddha actually say when he walked on the earth 2,500 years ago? And he, like I said before, he gave the five precepts to people as a way to begin the practice. The precepts are what you do before you begin to study the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path.
Mm.
I firmly believe, because my own practice has done this, by practicing the precepts, understanding the Four Noble Truths, living the Eightfold Path, doing meditation, a metta meditation daily, and counting my breaths, you can find deep, deep happiness just by following the path and the precepts. It's
Yeah.
very simple. And I have to believe that the Buddha walked the earth for 45 years with a message that never faltered. He said the same thing from the day of his awakening until the day of his passing. He taught the five precepts, he taught the Four Noble Truths, he taught the Noble Eightfold Path. I believe the Buddha taught compassion for all beings and that there's no ambiguity there.
Mm.
Compassion for all beings. He taught sentient beings deserve to live. They deserve to be in peace. So that's the reason why I love Buddhism so much, because I see it so clearly and it's so simple to me. So the
Yeah.
five precepts are, as the Buddha taught, they are the foundation, the precepts, what you need to do to clear the darkness from your eyes just enough so you can begin to see the Dharma. You need to practice the five precepts. So the first precept is no killing. I mentioned earlier, all beings love life, all beings fear death, therefore one should not slay nor cause to slay. Buddhists will to this day say, I'm not killing the animal so I can eat it. If you purchase the animal, you're causing it to be slain. So I'm not sure how people do this mental gymnastics stuff.
Yeah.
So the first precept is no killing. The second precept is no stealing. So once again, we could look at animal agriculture. Stealing an animal's life, stealing an animal's flesh. It does not just apply to stealing money, it applies to other things with animals. So the third precept is no sexual misconduct. On a personal level, that means I don't cheat, I don't behave inappropriately, I don't engage in watching videos that objectify other people. Like I avoid all sexual misconduct. The third precept can be applied to animal agriculture because of the practices of raping these animals in order to impregnate them. That is sexual misconduct, right? The fourth precept is no lying. So I'm vowed to tell the truth, to speak the truth, and to keep my mouth shut when I can't be kind, and to
Mm,
not speak about people when they're not present. That's a very powerful way to avoid gossip by practicing the fourth precept. And then the fifth precept is no intoxicants. That obviously means no alcohol, no drugs. But the Buddha taught that we don't ingest things through our eyes, our ears, or our mouth. And he called them the nutriments. We know of nutrients as vitamins and minerals we get from foods, but the Buddha taught about nutriments. And nutriments are anything you take in through your eyes, such as toxic news, horror movies, anything that's watering seeds of fear and hatred and darkness. You don't take that in through your eyes. You don't listen to the things that come in through your ears that water the seeds of violence. And you don't eat things through your mouth that water seeds of violence, that water the darkness. And animal flesh 100% falls into that category. And
mm,
the Buddha taught if you're eating animals, you're eating your family members. These all beings at one point have been your mother. So if you're eating the flesh of animals, you're eating the flesh of your ancestors. The Buddha had these teachings and they're very easy to find, but they're also other teachings that were also maybe misinterpreted, is how I look at it. And that's how people can key in on these and say, oh, well, he said this, but he also said that, or whatever. So, but yeah,
mm,
those five precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, as the foundation to a spiritual practice. If you do those things, your moral behavior is improved dramatically, you
mm.
know? So,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
doing those things is going to make you feel better. And then if you start actually practicing the Noble Eightfold Path and meditating and sending metta to all beings, like it's just you're bound to feel better. That's been my experience. So,
Nice. Yeah, yeah. And another point with the fourth precept, satya, truthfulness,
yes.
how it can relate to veganism and animals is that the industry lies. They are
Oh,
lying
yes.
about how wonderful the animals were treated. And you see these packages with the grassy hills and animals free and happy. That's a big lie. It is not the truth. So, consuming these animal products, you're perpetuating that lie that the animals are just fine, everything's okay, and they are happily skipping to the slaughterhouse. No,
Oh.
that is not the truth.
I think
So,
the lies that the dairy industry spreads, they're so toxic and so cruel. What the cows go through, the dairy industry, it's beyond heartbreaking.
yeah.
But then the dairy industry goes to spend billions of dollars on a smear campaign against soy milk and almond milk,
Yeah.
touting calcium is from milk. This is just everything is this such a lie. It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm
Yeah.
100% with you.
Yeah. And also too, interestingly, in some Buddhist shastra, there are restrictions on silk and wool and honey and all animal products. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
getting deeper in, right? And that's kind of how we want to do veganism. You start, let's not do meat, dairy, and eggs, get comfortable with that, and then you can take it further with no animal products at all, silk, wool, honey, all these things. But those are listed in some Buddhist shastra. Pretty much all animal products are restricted or avoided, and it really reads as very vegan.
Yes, I've spoken about how some Buddhists, and not all Buddhists are vegan, but let me be very clear. There are top Buddhist teachers in the Tibetan tradition who are very passionate about being vegan
Yeah,
and
Thich Nhat
speak about,
Hanh,
yes,
right?
and Thich Nhat Hanh. There's a video
Yeah.
of Thich Nhat Hanh on YouTube saying the joys of being vegan are an unbounded love, and everybody should be vegan. Those words came from Thich Nhat Hanh's
Wow.
mouth, also affectionately referred to Thai. I think of Thai as my teacher because I love the Plum Village tradition and I read his precepts every as part of my practice. I read the Plum Village precepts. But in every Buddhist tradition, in every lineage, from Tibetan, Mahayana, Theravadan, there are vegans. There are vegan Buddhist centers out there. We pulled them together, and that's what we're doing at DVA. So they are out there. We're just trying to have it be more normalized and
Yeah.
have it not be something that's a fringe conversation. So
Yeah. Another one I know of is the 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah.
yes,
They're still completely vegan, right? They had a little vegan restaurant, I think,
yes,
a while
yeah.
back. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. So through Dharma Voices for Animals, you're bringing sanghas that are already plant-based kind of together and Are you encouraging ones that are not to go plant-based?
Yes, so my first goal, there have been a couple different ideas of how to bring community together. And we've had a lot of different conversations about it. And what we're doing is with the Sustainable Sangha project is we're leaning into the environmental crisis, which most Buddhists, most people, but I feel like most Buddhists are aware that there's an environmental crisis. And often, like I was going to Buddhist centers in Marin County where people were showing up in Priuses, uh, carrying hemp bags, wearing hemp clothing, but still eating animal products. So
Yeah.
taking that last step to kind of help raise awareness. But the goal right now is, for example, we just had a Zen Center sign on to the Sustainable Sangha Collective in Santa Fe. So their policy is no flesh on campus. People can bring dairy or whatever they want if they're going on a retreat. They haven't told people they can't bring what they want to eat, but they're not providing it. So they're the perfect example of a center who is offering plant-based meals. And there's another place in Santa Cruz, they're offering plant-based meals. So the goal of the Sustainable Sangha Collective is just to bring all of these like-minded centers together as a form of recognition and creating community. If you are already offering plant-based food, you're doing good, right? So the more of these centers we can get together, let's say they're offering plant-based meals, another center may be offering plant-based meals 4 out of 5 days, and then one day of the week they're serving animal flesh. We still want to bring them in because we want to include everybody because many of these centers don't want to be offering any animal flesh, but they're doing it because they feel like they have to, because they have members from the community that come in and expect to eat certain foods and maybe want to eat this or that. The goal is to, once we get a lot of these groups together, it gives them the ability to say, hey, we're members of the Sustainable Sangha Collective, and we're all taking a stand and offering plant-based meals as a way to recognize the environmental crisis and honor the Buddha's Dharma, right? And by doing that, we're not telling anyone to do anything other than just join us on this path, have this conversation with us, become a part of a community of like-minded people who are addressing these issues, and let's have this conversation become more and more normalized. I feel, and there's psychology around that, like people kind of want to feel part of the herd. And if there's a center all by themselves who want to offer more plant-based food, but they're scared to, if they join the collective and they say, hey, we're a part of this 100 member group and we're all doing this together, that gives them the courage in a way to say, hey, we're going to be plant-based, you know? So that's
Yeah.
kind of the goal behind it is to normalize the conversation to where it's not something that a center would be afraid of bringing to their members.
No, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah. What a great idea. Start with the positive. Start by lifting up.
Recognition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
recognition, lifting up those that are doing it right, that are taking this path and kind of bringing them together so you've got this momentum and then that makes others want to join in, right? To be
Yep.
part of that. Ah, okay, I see they're doing this good thing, then let's be part of that. Yeah.
Yes, that's the goal, just to kind of bring people together, you know.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. All right, good work. So, my husband, Kojin Bohannik, and I are exploring vegan as a spiritual practice. And we have a gathering, the Ahimsa Living Circle. I know you came to our last gathering. Thank you for joining us. And we're kind of trying to figure out beyond just bringing spiritual vegans into a sangha or a group, a gathering of spiritual minded people, we're really trying to dig a little deeper and explore veganism actually as a spiritual practice or part of, right, a spiritual journey. And I know that you agree that vegan can be a part of our spiritual path. So, what does that look like to you?
Well, I think this is really a cool idea. And yeah, I'll put in a little plug for the Ahimsa Living Circle. I went just the other day. It was great. So anyone listening that hasn't gone, highly recommend it. It was really great to just see other people and people were sharing different ideas and I was copying and pasting the links that everyone was sharing. It was very educational and informative. So,
Oh, thank you.
but I think it's important to recognize that vegan is not food. People, okay, so I'm visiting family. My sister went to get donuts for everyone and got me a couple vegan donuts. And, to a non-vegan, oh, what a nice thing to do. I got everyone donuts and I got my vegan, buddy, a couple vegan donuts, but I bought animal products for everyone else. It's completely lost on people. It's not like vegan is vanilla and other stuff is chocolate. It's not different
Yeah.
flavors. A different, this is a different situation entirely. Like the food we eat is spiritual energy for us. And I like the idea of vegan as spiritual because that gives it more depth. Many people just think it's, oh, I could never be vegan. Well, what do you mean? If you could never be vegan, then you're committed to animal abuse. That's what you're saying? Like
Yeah.
they don't grasp that it's not just a food or a flavor of food. It has more depth than that. When we say we're vegan, we're not exploiting or commodifying animals. We don't believe an animal should be kept like that. And whatever culture you were raised in, you were taught certain things. We don't eat dolphins. We don't eat dogs. We eat pigs. We eat cows. You go over here, they eat dogs. You go over there, they eat whales. I don't eat whales, but they eat whales. They think I'm crazy because I eat this. I think they're crazy because that eat. We're all just culturally programmed in a speciesist ideology to think certain animals are food and certain animals are not food. So when we become vegan and we say no animals are food, it has more depth than a lot of people grasp. They just think that we're saying, I don't want to eat this because it bothers my stomach or something. No, it's much, much deeper than that. So, making a commitment to be loving and kind to all beings is incredible. And I've watched a lot of an activist named Earthling Ed, and he was at a Cube of Truth, I believe is what it was, in Berkeley. And a man stopped him and said, hey, there's people being killed in the streets. I myself fear when I walk down the street as a black man for my life some days. And you guys are out here worried about chickens when there's people living in fear. And Earthling Ed had a beautiful answer to that. He said, first off, thank you for your passion and your courage to come up and share with us your experience. And just because we stand against animal abuse doesn't mean we support other things. We feel you can support many things, and many of the activists here do different things on different days. Today, we're just talking for the animals. But we as vegans believe that speciesism, the idea that one animal is food and one animal is a pet, is one of the first forms of hatred that we're ever taught. And that if we're raised to think all beings, whether they have skin, scale, furs, if they're black, if they're white, no matter who they are, they deserve to be happy. And you were taught that from birth, that we don't need animals because all beings deserve love. Do you think that person would grow up to be racist? Do you think that person would grow up with hatred in their heart? Or would they be full of love because they were raised from birth to know all beings deserve life, all beings deserve love? So, yeah, I think identifying as a spiritual vegan is really powerful. And doing activism on the streets, I've met some vegans who are so angry and they just want to fight everybody. And you're not effective as a vegan if you're walking around with that in your heart because whatever is in your heart, you're just projecting out to the world. So if you're angry, nobody is going to be like, oh, I want to do what he's doing or she's doing or they're doing because that's just not attractive. So,
Yeah, that's beautifully said. A lot of things in there were amazing. Spiritual food. You said something about, having the food be spiritual. It's beyond just, a different kind of food. Like you have Chinese one night, you have vegan the next night, you have Italian the next night. Like, no, no, it's something completely different. That's absolutely true. And what we put in our bodies, it reflects our ethics, how we feel, all of that. And then what a beautiful answer to this person who was like, well, what about the humans?
yeah.
And, and this is something that I've been trying to bring into the podcast, trying to have guests on that we talk about how vegan is a social justice issue. It is part of that systematic violence of oppression to all beings. And what a beautiful thought. I had never thought this before, but it's true. It's kind of the first violence or othering that we experience as children.
Mhm.
Absolutely, that's so true. I mean, that's really, really powerful. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
I think there's like one thing I want to add into that is like, so, I've talked with veganism about with different people, and someone will say something, well, there's so many problems in the world right now. Why would I care about the animals when there's these wars happening and this horrible thing happening?
Mm,
And, I heard an activist to say that you couldn't help a homeless person in your neighborhood because there's a war in Syria is very illogical.
Right,
You know,
right.
we can do more than one thing at a time,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
say I don't care about the animals because there's bigger problems is the same thing as saying, I couldn't help a homeless person here because there's a war in Syria, for example. Or
Yeah.
the way I look at this is that there are so many problems on this planet, and so many of them tie back into the food on our plate, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But not all problems have an equally simple solution, right? So, yes, there are wars in this world. And me sitting here in the United States, I have the ability to vote and have an opinion and do a rally, do a peace rally and raise my voice and let people know how I feel. But at the end of the day, I have very little power over some of these people in other countries that are making decisions. And it's tragic what's happening on the planet. However, I do have the ability to solve one horrible injustice every time I eat a meal.
Yeah. This is something we can do.
If you look at, yeah, the
Yeah.
number of animals that are slaughtered annually is beyond, it's beyond even comprehension. It's like 90 billion land animals are slaughtered every year, 2 to 3 trillion marine animals. Ecosystems are collapsing. The earth is in trouble. Every time I sit down to a meal, I can choose a plant-based option that doesn't have the inherent suffering built in that, the environmental impact built into that. And if you don't care about animals and you don't care about the earth and you're all about humans, well, hey, let's fight for slaughterhouse workers. No one wants to do this job. Slaughterhouse workers suffer from horrible trauma, highest rates of suicide and domestic abuse and alcoholism and drug addiction. It's a brutal job that nobody wants. So even if you can't get behind animals and human rights is your thing, like, hey, veganism solves so many problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the water reduction, the land use reduction, the animal suffering. Oh my God, it's just hard to grasp. So
Yeah. Well, so I do want to ask you about something else before we run out of time. So, Forrest, you were before DVA, before Dharma Voices for Animals, you were an interpretive park ranger for the National Park Service. And I'm curious what that is. What did you do there?
yeah, so it was great. My wife and I were summer seasonal workers for the National Park Service for 5 years, 5 summers. We worked in the Presidio of San Francisco for a couple summers. We worked up in Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park one summer, and then we spent the last 2 years working in the Marin Headlands at the Point Bonita Lighthouse, which is part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Beautiful area. When you drive over the Golden Gate Bridge and you look to the west, there's a little lighthouse out there called Point Bonita.
Yeah, I've seen
We
it.
spent
Yep.
2 summers out there. It's beautiful watching whales and meeting people from all over the earth. And there's two different types of rangers in the National Park Service. There's the fun rangers and the gun rangers. So the gun rangers are law enforcement. We need them. We're grateful that they protect the park. And then there's the fun rangers that we wear the flat hats and we tell the
Are
stories.
you saying fun? FUN?
Yes,
Fun Rangers. Okay.
fun rangers. That's like the little joke we said. Are you a gun ranger or a fun ranger? So
Okay, I
uh,
see.
but yeah, we got to wear the flat hat and tell the story. We're almost kind of like an iconic American image when you think of the
Yeah.
National Park Service. And
Yeah.
so an interpreter is basically there's different principles of interpretation when they bring you in, they train you to be an interpreter. And for example, we worked at the lighthouse, and one of the principles of interpretation, which this goes back to what we were talking about with Buddhism, within 100 years of the Buddha's passing, there was different schools fracturing into arguments about what the Buddha said and how he meant this and what that meant. And so interpretation leaves so much up to one's own ideology. But one of the principles of interpretation that the Park Service trained us on is that interpretation is not just education, it's provocation. And by that, we want to provoke new ideas in you. So they really challenged us to and weave an environmental message into our discussion. So I went up the chain of command up to the top of the park and I said, hey, the United Nations has suggested, the IPCC, that in order to combat the environmental crisis, that we shift towards a plant-based diet. Can I present this information as an interpreter and tie it into the history of the lighthouse? And they said, go for it.
Wow.
So I spent months tailoring this message and I would try it one way and try it another way. I got to give an hour talk once a week, but then every day I could give a 15 to 20-minute talk and I would see what went over and what didn't. And I spent basically 2 years, crafting a message that talked about the history of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, with whaling, with all of the fur rush and all of the animals that were hunted for fur. And I would talk about the environmental catastrophe happening with plastics in the ocean. And then I would shift gears and talk about animal agriculture. And what are we doing to the earth right now with the rainforests and the climate and the ocean? And everybody would pause and wait for the answer is to shift to a plant-based diet. And oh my gosh, people would come out to the lighthouse thinking they were going to hear a story about a boat and a lighthouse, and they were hearing about this ranger talk about shifting to a plant-based diet is the greatest thing you can do and I got to give this talk 100 times. I don't know how many people heard it. Some days five, some days one, other days 50 to 60. So,
Mm.
um,
Wow.
and sometimes people would come up and give me a high five. Other times people would walk by and grumble at me. And uh, other times people would storm off and tell another ranger that was the best ranger talk I've ever heard. So I never knew what I was going to get. And
Wow.
yeah, so
Amazing.
they did a hiring freeze and we didn't get to go back and do that this year, which that message would have been banned by the current administration anyway. I would not be out there talking about plant-based food currently if I was still there. So I'm glad I'm with Dharma Voices for Animals. I'm able to fully use my voice for the animals. As a park ranger, I did not talk about ethics. I couldn't cross some thresholds, but I could
Right.
talk about the environment and the earth and the ocean. It was really fun to get to do that. So
Yeah, that's great. I love when people find creative ways to weave in vegan education to their job or their hobbies or whatever it is.
yeah,
So that's great. I love it.
yeah. And so with DVA, I've taken. So I found DVA, a friend, Dave Simon, who wrote Meatonomics. I was going to his meditation group, and he said, "Oh, if you like Buddhism, you should check out DVA. They're really doing great things for the animals." So I started going to the DVA monthly Sangha, which I'll put a pitch in real quick for that. We have the last Sunday of the month. Every month we have a vegan activist, activist meditation Sangha for Buddhists and non-Buddhists. It's just a way to go and meditate and connect with other vegans. At 9 a.m. Pacific, if you go to dharmavoicesforanimals.org, you can find the link to attend that gathering. So, and while I'm talking about DVA here, we do need donations. We're a nonprofit. We need help. So if you want to make a donation for our cause for the Sustainable Sangha Collective, you can become a monthly donor for $5 or up. One-time donor. We really appreciate that. We need your support, and by helping us, you can definitely make a difference.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We'll definitely put links in the show notes to DVA. And maybe if you send me a link to the specific meditation gathering, I'll put that in there too.
Yes.
Great. Well, Forrest, we do need to wrap up. So I'm going to ask you our last question. What gives you hope for the future?
That's a great question. Sometimes I get so overwhelmed by the cries of the world that I just start to feel dark.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming. Like I have a very visceral reaction to animal suffering, and the suffering in this world is so immense. But what gives me hope is being around like-minded individuals. And I feel like if you are vegan, if you're new to being vegan, or if you're not, it's really important to connect with other vegans. And when I'm around vegans, everything just clicks. I don't have to keep my mouth shut, or I don't have to feel like I'm going to be judged, or I don't have to feel like people are feeling judged by me. It's just a simple, happy feeling that you get when you're around like-minded people. And that gives me so much hope. Um, and I also see the world and I see the shifts that are happening. And I know people are waking up to a lot of these truths. There is so much more information out there. There's definitely a fighting against the information as well. But I know that people do have a vegan heart. Most people care about animals. Most people don't want to hurt animals. And when they find this information, they could change. And my own story gives me hope because I grew up hunting and eating barbecue and worked at a barbecue house and was a complete total carnist to the core. And a switch flipped in me. And all of a sudden, I was no longer that person. I mean, a dramatic shift in personal identity and ideologies and beliefs is incredible. Happens. So if it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. It's kind of how I look at it.
That's great.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Like-minded communities, places where vegans gather, is very hopeful. And there's so many more of those now. 30 years ago, when I first went vegan, it was so rare to have a
Yes,
gathering of vegan people. We just didn't really congregate because there were so few of us and we're so spread out. But now there's so many opportunities, both in person and online, to gather. So we have really grown as a community.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Forrest, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was wonderful to hear more about Buddhism and the connection to veganism. And I really appreciate the work you're doing for Dharma Voices for Animals. And I hope we can talk again sometime. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Hope, for having me, and thank you for everything you do, your books and everything, the work you're doing, and Kojin as well. You guys are amazing. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Forrest. Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. As Forrest said, the Buddha's message is simple and unwavering: compassion and kindness for others, no killing, coupled with conscious ethical living, is a path to more happiness and less misery for all. And I love that. Be sure to check out Dharma Voices for Animals to learn more. There are links in the show notes. And if you are a spiritually leaning, compassionate person, you can also join me and my husband Kojin for our virtual Ahimsa Living Circle every second Saturday of the month. I will drop a link to that free registration in the show notes as well. So please remember that vegan is more than a diet, more than a lifestyle. It's a comprehensive path of nonviolence. It's ethical living. It's a social justice movement. But ultimately, it's a stance to do no harm to any living being. And I think the Buddha would approve. So please live vegan.